Okay, so I'm going to walk you through one of our workflows. So I'll start off by showing the data source. Just open up our project deliverable. So the first data source we used was data from a study on the Pima Indians and indigenous people in Arizona who have really high rates of type 2 diabetes. So this is what the raw data looks like. So all the people that were surveyed were women, and they were asked how many times were they pregnant. They were administered this oral glucose tolerance test, which essentially the higher this value, the more severe the diabetic symptoms are. Their diastolic blood pressure, that's the number at the bottom, is like 130/80. Diastolic would be the 80. Tricep skin fold thickness, we didn't do anything with that. 2-hour serum insulin, we looked at that, but it didn't produce anything interesting. Body mass index, diabetes pedigree function is some sort of statistical model that we ignored. Age and class variable we also ignored because I couldn't find any documentation about what that actually means. So we look over at our project deliverable. The first question that we asked was, of number of pregnancies, BMI, and diastolic blood pressure, which of those is the best or more strongly correlated with severity of diabetic symptoms? And we use the 2-hour oral glucose tolerance test as the way of determining the severity. So the higher that is, oversimplification, the more severe the diabetes is. So the way that we got this data is basically did the same thing 3 times. So we started off with that raw data, ran it through and aggregated on number of pregnancies, BMI, and diastolic blood pressure, and then wrote that out to a spreadsheet. So here's what the mapping looks like for the metadata, and here's what we actually pulled out. So for this particular one, we were looking at the number of pregnancies. For this first one, I also had this insulin in here, but it ended up being really weird looking when the data came out, so I kind of ignored it. And then here's our aggregation. There we go. So we aggregated on the number of pregnancies, and then we found the average OGTT and insulin. So what that ended up looking like is right here. So there's an R-squared of 0.4 correlating the number of pregnancies with the OGTT, so a pretty weak correlation, but maybe something there. This is the one that really stood out, though. The BMI is 0.99. So in order to get these categories, I just did a little bit of work in MySQL and had it create a new table based on what the patient's BMI was, and it assigned them a category, so then I was able to aggregate on these categories. And then when we did that with diastolic blood pressure, this is the weakest correlation with 0.24, so not a whole lot there.